we know President Trump blurs the lines between executive, legislature, judiciary. So he dropped a bombshell with his gold card announcement. So Nicolai, would you share what that announcement was and what's the impact of that?
Yeah, so I think the scope of the impact was greater than the content of the announcement itself, which was, pretty slim on details. What was announced was the creation of a gold card, presumably differentiated from a green card, that would cost $5 million for an individual to invest in. And seemingly that investment would not be repayable because President Trump talked about using the proceeds to pay down the national debt. Although he also talked about job creation, and as EB-5 attorneys, it would be kind of difficult to square how those things might work together. But that was the announcement. He didn't specifically say that the EB-5 program should be eliminated, though there was some comment from the Commerce Secretary that might happen. So subsequent statements suggest that maybe there's a possibility that EB-5 would coexist alongside this new gold card. But again, we are waiting for more details to emerge from the administration. I would say one positive takeaway is the focus on investment migration as a possible solution to issues perhaps like the debt or other issues that face this country. Infrastructure funding, housing funding, things like that are ones that EB-5 can address. And in fact, if you look at one of the key provisions of the RA, we'll talk about this more later, there was a real focus on moving EB-5 investment to rural areas in the United States. And we'll talk about how there's a 20% set aside for rural and priority processing for rural. Those were not accidental provisions. Congress wanted EB-5 money to reach into areas that EB-5 money had not really been deployed in before. And they've been very successful in doing that. So I think when the administration pauses a little and looks at what EB-5 is actually doing today, post RIA, as Rohit mentioned, $6 billion. That's not an insignificant sum of money. So that's the announcement. The impact has been some confusion, but as Rohit mentioned, the law is here, right? The law exists, and only Congress has the power to change or amend that law. That can't be done by way of executive order. So just like Trump came out against birthright citizenship, that is just an announcement. It's just a press conference. It's just a policy position. It has no impact in law. So too, this announcement about EB-5 currently has no impact in law. The program exists. People who are filing today will get receipt notices, and we believe, based on the provisions in the RIA, that people will be grandfathered in until September 2026.
So what you're suggesting is that the president cannot change the laws by tweeting or posting on Truth Social?
Yes, that is the thing. Exactly. Now, that doesn't mean he can't move policy or opinion. And I think it behooves the industry to explain to people, why EB-5 was characterized incorrectly, and that in fact it has facets to it and features that are a little more complicated and can't necessarily be captured in a soundbite.
Understood. Great. Rohit, can the president change the investment amount just by passing an executive order? Can he scrap the program by signing an executive order?
No, I mean, focusing in on what Nicolai said is only Congress can pass a law. Only Congress can initiate such a program in a sense. The president and the executive branch are there to enforce the terms of the law. That's why we have a three-tiered system within the government here. And so Does the president need Congress in order to issue this? Yes. I mean, from a perspective of you've got visa issuances that come under the State Department. You have USCIS, which actually adjudicates the underlying petitions and determines whether somebody can remain in the United States. And then you have the executive branch, which oversees those two elements, but they can't go beyond that frame to actually do more than that. What I think we're going to end up with, and anything can change, but this idea of having two coexisting programs is completely possible. There are lots of other countries that have investment by migration programs, and they all have this, not all of them, but some of them have this tier where you have one which is at one investment level with its own terms and conditions, and then you have another which is at a different level. And in order to have an offering for $5 million, which is going to be beyond the reach of many people, which 800,000 is already beyond the reach for most people, but you will have to sweeten that in some way. So there's going to be a way to differentiate, but to replace the program that has already been passed, enacted by law, and which has a grandfathering provision. And there was a reason why the industry went after that grandfathering, is because they were focused in on, well, what happens if there's a change in the executive branch? What happens if there's a change in sentiment towards immigration? It cannot just by virtue of executive action, which, to be clear, we don't even have executive action right now. We have statements that have been made in policy. So I think where the industry is falling back on is like, look, there's panic among the investors. There's panic existing and prospective. There's confusion about what the executive branch intends to do. And so there's this movement now to say, we are an industry, we're strong, we're creating jobs, we're providing benefits to investors, but collectively we stand ready to work with the administration to ensure that it meets its own objectives. Jobs are created, and to the extent there can be funds that are coming in to pay down the national debt, so be it. 6.1 billion that has already been shown to come in, plus the hundreds of millions, which probably we're now close to 7.1, 7.5 billion. All of that were funds that would not have come into the United States but for the EB-5 program. So yes, national debt being at 36 trillion, I don't think any program by itself is going to pay off the national debt, but certainly whatever scraps or dents that can be made, both programs could be lived side by side.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Nicolai, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I agree with that characterization. It will not be feasible, of course, to have two programs if the requirements and the benefits are the same. So Rohit is absolutely right. They have to sweeten the pot for the $5 million gold card. One comment that Trump made was that those individuals don't have to pay taxes. That is a big disincentive for very high net worth individuals for moving to the United States because generally they're subject to taxation on their worldwide income. I'm not a tax advisor, I'm not giving tax advice, but that's a general concept that people are familiar with. But if there was some way to insulate a high net worth individual, if they were to get the gold card, that would certainly make it more attractive. One of the benefits to EB-5 that many people point out is, in fact, that tax obligation, right? So you're getting the $800,000 investment that's working in the U.S. economy, but you're also getting all of the sort of downstream benefits, right? An individual and a family moves here, they buy cars, they buy houses, they pay taxes. So the overall economic impact in the United States is certainly not limited to the 6.1 billion that and it's probably more, 7 billion just in EB-5 financing that has been injected into the U.S. economy. It goes way, way beyond that. But I think that is a distinct possibility that we do end up with, sort of two side-by-side programs, and that is not at all unprecedented. Also, as Rohit mentioned, many countries have two-tiered systems like that.
And I will just add one last thing to that. If we were to insulate the $5 million gold card investors, there would have to be an amendment to the tax code as well. So it's not what is being discussed. The feasibility of what is being discussed is, it's a high bar to meet, number one. But number two, even if we could get something through an act of Congress in order to pass it, keep in mind, EB-5, it took years to get a program, the EB-5 Reform Integrity Program. And it's not an easy thing. Immigration is already a challenging subject to begin with. But by the time you start to focus in on what exactly is being done, what are the preference systems, how it could be to a disadvantage or advantage of some over the others, that then takes a full focus by Congress to sit back and look at what the bedrock of the Constitution is. So in of itself, again, the industry stands ready to work with the executive branch on this and with the president. But what I'm trying to convey to the audience here is there's a lot more work to be done, and it's going to take time and effort on both sides to make something work. But for the benefit of investors investing today, they have the protections that are in there within the act, and that's what we're relying on and focusing on.
Correct. And if we look at the history of the program starting November 2019, we all know what happened when unilaterally USCIS decided to increase the investment amount to 900K, and then that was overruled. And also, just with that sticker shock, there were hardly any investors that invested in 2019 and 2020. Granted, there was the pandemic, etc., but we had conversations with investors, and they were like, 500K was attractive, 900K, we'll think about it. So if you're talking about a $5 million investment, I mean, and also a documented $5 million investment, that's a lot of money.
It's a whole different level of investor, right? I think that one of the big misconceptions that people have when they don't know about EB-5 and they hear about it is, this is just a visa for rich people to buy citizenship. And that is so categorically false. I am not saying that somebody who's able to invest $800,000 isn't well off, comparatively speaking. But many clients, they're mortgaging houses, they're leveraging assets up to a very large percentage of their total net worth, right? So there are many people in those countries who own property that may have appreciated to a level of $1 million if they live in major metropolitan areas. Now, they're wealthy, but they're not high net worth individuals, right? I mean, you certainly could call them rich in one context, but still, they're raising a family and making ends meet. And these individuals are by and large the majority of EB-5 investors that we see. We typically don't see very, very high net worth individuals investing in EB-5.
Yeah, I agree with that statement. I think a lot of our investors, majority of their net worth is invested into an EB-5 petition, right? And for them, it's a generational investment. They're doing it for themselves, but also for their children and, their future generations. So they have a long-term outlook on this green card and this investment, so they feel comfortable with it. There are obviously ultra HNIs doing this for their children, etc. But historically, if you look at ultra HNIs, they get attracted to jurisdictions like Dubai and Singapore because there are tax benefits. They don't want a US green card and have their global income taxed by the United States. So you're absolutely right. Majority of the investors, a major chunk of their net worth is invested into making this qualifying investment for EB-5 and getting a green card.